Have you ever experienced an intense wave of déjà vu? That chillingly familiar feeling of a place you know you have never been, or a stranger's face you feel like you have known for 1,000 lifetimes? Have you ever heard a piece of music and felt your heart break with an unnamed sorrow, a longing for a home you cannot even name? We often reassure ourselves that it is just a glitch in the brain, a trick of our memory. But I ask you to pause for just 1 second. What if it is not a glitch? What if it is an echo? A faint signal piercing through millennia of silence, a fragment of memory from a life you lived before you were even human. Welcome to our channel, where we do not just recount history, but awaken the memories buried within your very DNA. The story today is not found in the familiar pages of Scripture. It is older than that. It was woven from the threads of light and shadow before the earth had a name, before time began its relentless march. And I promise you, this story, though it begins in distant cosmic realms, will end in the most unexpected place of all. It will end right inside your own chest, in this very moment. But before we embark on this journey through the dust of time together, let us do something small, yet incredibly meaningful. Let us know right now where on this planet you are listening from and what time your clock shows. Let us, though we may be thousands of miles apart, create a meeting point in the stream of the cosmos, right here, right now. Please comment with your location and your time, so we know that in this moment we are not alone. Now close your eyes. Imagine a time before the beginning, an age of silence. There was no sun, no moon, only an endless expanse, a silent canvas of the Creator. The universe then was an unsung symphony, a poem yet to be written. But in that great silence, there was not emptiness. Beings existed. They were not angels, nor were they gods as we imagine them. They were the craftspeople, the artisans of the universe. They were the architects of dawn. They were born from the very thought of the source, beings who wove stars from nothingness and breathed life into galaxies with the melody of cosmic mathematics. They were the ones who laid the foundations of reality, who witnessed the birth of the first light and the primordial dark. They had no fixed form. They were streams of pure energy, brilliant consciousnesses wielding the power of creation. Among them, there were two schools of thought, two great currents of energy, representing two paths to shaping all that is. The foremost, the most respected, was Malyor. Picture Malyor as a stream of blue-white light, as cold and perfect as a diamond. To Malyor, the universe was a colossal equation, and beauty lay in absolute precision, in flawless order. He looked down upon the silent canvas of Earth, where the first clay beings began to stir, and he saw errors. He saw the chaos of emotion, the illogic of love, the weakness of compassion. To Malyor, this was not potential. It was a system flaw, a bug that needed to be fixed. He believed that for these beings to become great, they needed to be given the knowledge of power, of control, of unyielding logic. They needed to have their chaotic human part removed to become perfectly divine. But in opposition to Malyor, there was another being. Her name was Liriel. If Malyor was the cold light of intellect, Liriel was the warm golden light of empathy. She did not weave stars with formulas. She sang them into existence. Her every movement created a melody, a vibration that spread life. When Liriel looked down at those clay beings, she did not see flaws. She saw a miracle. She was captivated by the first laugh, a sound that obeyed no law of physics, yet could make the cosmos tremble. She was mesmerized by the first tear, a simple chemical compound that held an entire universe of loss and love. To Liriel, humanity's imperfection was not a flaw. It was the very source of beauty, the fertile ground for the universe's greatest power, the capacity for creation and unconditional love. She saw in them a potential that not even the architects of dawn possessed. And right there on the balcony of the universe, looking down at the young blue sphere, a fracture began to form. A silent civil war of ideas erupted among the stars. One side wanted to upgrade humanity with power. The other wanted to protect humanity with love. Two paths, two destinies. And humanity, the innocent children of the universe, had no idea that their fate was about to be decided by a debate between beings whose existence they did not even know. This battle would not be fought with the swords of angels, but with the gifts they were about to bring down to earth. And those gifts would change everything, forever. The division could no longer be contained, and so they descended. It was not a descent in glory with trumpets and banners. It was a tearing of the veil between realities. Imagine that moment. The sky above the primordial earth suddenly rippled like a disturbed lake. The air grew thick, carrying the scent of ozone and an unknown energy. Malyor's faction arrived first. They did not appear in human form, but as phenomena. A bolt of lightning struck a dry tree, and for the first time, humanity knew fire. But it was not just fire for warmth. In the eyes of the first humans gazing at the dancing flames, Malyor planted an idea. Fire is also a weapon. A boulder cracked open on its own, revealing shimmering veins of metal within. But along with the knowledge of how to forge metal, Malyor whispered strategies into their minds. Methods to turn that metal into swords and spears, into tools to dominate others. He gave them the knowledge of astronomy, not to admire the beauty of the stars, but to predict, to control, to plan for conquests. Malyor's gift was the knowledge of power. It was cold, efficient, and deeply seductive. It promised a shortcut past the weakness of instinct. Then Liriel's faction arrived, but their arrival was entirely different. They did not bring fire, they brought a meteor shower that glittered like diamond dust. And when those particles touched the ground, they did not burn, but sprouted flowers of colors that had never existed. Liriel did not teach humanity to forge swords. She touched a woman's larynx, and for the first time a lullaby was sung, a melody that could soothe a crying child. She did not teach them strategy. She breathed into a man's mind the image of a perfect shape, and he began to mold clay into the first sculpture, for no purpose at all, simply for beauty's sake. And the most dangerous gift Liriel brought, the one that Malyor despised and feared, was not a technology or a formula. She pointed to two humans, a man and a woman, and wove an invisible thread between them. For the first time, one person looked at another and felt that their happiness was more important than their own. For the first time, one was willing to sacrifice to protect the other. It was the gift of empathy, of altruism, of love. It was the knowledge of the heart. The world, from that moment on, was forever changed. It became a painful and glorious contradiction. Imagine a primitive village. By day, the men with the sharp gaze of Malyor used bronze tools to build defensive walls higher and stronger each day. They planned how to take the land of the tribe across the river, calculating food supplies, calculating troop strength, logic, and power. But when night fell, those same men would sit around a fire listening to an old woman tell a fairy tale, a story that was not real but made their hearts ache. The same women who by day used reason to divide food fairly would by night weave textiles with patterns of stars and dreams. And then the hybrid children were born, the beings that legends would later call the Nephilim. But they were not simply brutish giants. They were living tragedies. A Nephilim might have the strength to uproot an ancient tree with his bare hands, but at night would sit alone and weep at the beauty of the moon. He could design a complex war machine, but then spend hours trying to sketch the face of his deceased mother on a cave wall. They carried within them both the destructive power of Malyor and the creative sorrow of Liriel. They were the living proof of the civil war in the human soul. The world began to explode. Agriculture developed at a dizzying pace, but the most fertile fields became the targets of the bloodiest wars. The first cities were built, towers reaching for the clouds, but in the highest rooms, kings felt more alone than ever. Humanity learned to heal with herbs, but also learned to create poison from them. They had the ability to build a paradise, but they kept creating a hell for themselves. Liriel looked down, her heart breaking but still filled with hope. She saw in that chaos the first lessons of balance. But Malyor, he looked down with disgust. For him, this was irrefutable proof. The experiment had utterly failed. The chaos had gone too far. The system flaw had become a virus, and there was only one way to deal with a virus. You wipe the entire operating system and reinstall from scratch. The confrontation could no longer be silent. It was time for a final verdict. Both factions returned to the source, the ultimate creator, to present their cases. Imagine a space beyond all definition. There is no up, no down, only an infinite presence of pure consciousness. This is the source. Malyor and Liriel stood before that presence, not in flesh and blood, but as their very energetic essence. Malyor spoke first, and his voice echoed like metal striking metal, cold and sharp. He presented undeniable evidence: the wars, the betrayals, the greed, the destruction of the environment. He projected into the space images of burning cities, rivers stained red with blood, faces twisted in hatred. "Behold," Malyor declared, "this is the result of freedom. This is the fruit of emotion. We gave them a chance, and they have turned the beautiful garden you created into a wasteland of chaos. The experiment has failed. The virus of emotion that Liriel planted has spread uncontrollably. There must be a great cleansing. Let them and their children return to dust, and we shall begin again. This time there will be no mistakes, only order, only perfection." He finished, and a heavy silence fell. Malyor's arguments were irrefutable. They were the truth. Then it was Liriel's turn. Her light seemed to dim with sorrow, but it was not extinguished. Her voice did not echo, but whispered like the wind through leaves, soft yet powerful. She did not deny the images Malyor had shown. Instead, she projected different ones. A mother running into a fire to save her child. A soldier kneeling in tears over the enemy he was just forced to kill. An artist spending his entire life carving a statue of hope, knowing it could be destroyed in tomorrow's war. An old couple holding hands, watching the sunset, with nothing left but the love they had for each other. "Yes," Liriel said softly, "they are flawed. They struggle, they fall. But look, even in the darkest night, they never stop searching for the light. Even when surrounded by destruction, they never stop creating beauty. Even with broken hearts, they never stop learning how to love. They are not a failed experiment. They are a child learning to walk. They stumble, yes, but they always try to get back up. Please do not take that chance away from them. Give them more time. Compassion is not a virus. It is the seed of divinity. It just needs time to bloom." Silence fell once more. The entire universe seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the final judgment. The fate of humanity, of a world, rested in that silence. And then the source spoke. The voice produced no sound, but a vibration that resonated directly into the consciousness of all things. A decision had been made. There will be a cleansing. A flood will wash it all away. Malyor's light flared, a cold smile of victory present in his energy field. Order had won. Liriel's light nearly died out. She had lost. Humanity would be erased. But it was in that moment of utter despair that Liriel did something that not even the source could have foreseen. An act of mad love and ultimate sacrifice, an act that would forever change the laws of the universe. She turned, looking directly at Malyor, her light no longer warm but blazing like a dying star. "You want order, Malyor? Fine, you will have it. The flood will come." she said, her voice now thundering across the realms. "But I will not let the legacy of love be erased. I will not let the fire I ignited be extinguished." And then, to the astonishment of Mallier and the silence of the Source, Liriel and all of the Architects of Dawn from her Guardian faction did the unthinkable. They willingly shattered. This was not a death. It was a transformation. Imagine thousands of suns exploding at once, not in destruction, but in a final liberating act of energy release. Their pure light essence broke apart into billions upon billions of tiny fragments, each one a shimmering golden spark, carrying the entire essence of empathy, altruism, and creative love. And those sparks did not vanish into the void. They dove towards Earth like a great meteor shower, not to destroy, but to seek refuge. They found a small family, a man named Noah and his kin, who had still preserved their kindness in a world of chaos. That divine rain of fire merged into their very bloodline, planting within their genetic code, in every cell, in their very souls, an immortal gift. That gift had a name, the spark of empathy. The fall, recorded in legends, it turns out, was not a punishment. It was a deliberate sacrifice. Liriel was not cast down to earth. She chose to become a part of it. She and her followers gave up their immortality, their divine power, to become an eternal whisper in the human heart. Mallier stood there, stunned. He had won the battle, but Liriel had won the war. He could erase the world, but he could not erase the legacy she had just planted within it. From that moment on, the history of humanity was rewritten. We are not the consequence of a mistake. We are the inheritors of the universe's greatest love. And then the flood came. Dark clouds gathered, obscuring the sun. The sky seemed to break open, unleashing colossal torrents of water. The oceans rose, swallowing the highest mountains. The proud cities of humankind, the towers built from Mallier's cold knowledge, crumbled and sank into oblivion. But now the meaning of the flood had completely changed. It was no longer an act of punishment from an angry creator. It had become an act of protection from a sacrificial love. The water did not just wash away sin, it washed away the influence of Mallier. It was a cleansing, yes, but to remove the cold logic, the unfeeling power that had poisoned humanity. It enveloped and shielded the small bloodline carrying the spark of empathy, protecting Liriel's seed from being extinguished. Noah's Ark, floating on the endless water, was not just a means of survival. It had become a symbol. It was the covenant Ark of hope, a sanctuary for the legacy of love, sailing safely upon a raft designed to protect, not to destroy. The cosmic tragedy had become a song of maternal protection. For 40 days and 40 nights, the water cleansed the world. And when the water receded, leaving behind a new, fresh, and silent world, humanity had a new beginning. A beginning built not on power, but on hope. They stepped out of the ark, breathed the clean air, and for the first time they looked at each other not with the eyes of competitors, but with the empathy of fellow survivors. Liriel's legacy had begun to take root. But the war was not over. It had just shifted into a new, more subtle and silent form. The world was reborn, but the memory of the two legacies persisted, like subterranean currents shaping the course of human history. Mallier's legacy was not completely erased. It survived in fragments of old knowledge, in forgotten symbols of power. Over the centuries, it regenerated itself, hiding in secret societies and clandestine organizations obsessed with power, control, and emotionless knowledge. They were the ones who sought ancient artifacts, who deciphered old texts, not to understand the past, but to harness its power. They believed that emotion was a weakness to be eliminated, and that humanity could only achieve greatness through absolute order and total control. Mallier's legacy is the whisper in the minds of tyrants, of fanatics, of those willing to sacrifice humanity for power. It is the cold logic behind war machines, soulless financial systems, and ideologies that divide people. But Liriel's legacy also came to life, and it was more powerful than ever because it did not reside in books or tombs. It lived within people themselves. The spark of empathy that she had planted in Noah's bloodline spread through the generations. It did not need grand temples or complex rituals. It manifested in the smallest, most extraordinary actions. It is the moment a stranger stops to help another who has fallen on the street. It is the tear in a soldier's eye as he looks at a photo of his enemy's family. It is the warmth in your chest when you see a beautiful sunrise. It is the effort of a scientist toiling in a lab to find a cure, not for fame, but out of compassion. It is the melody of a song that can make millions of distant hearts beat as one. It is the embrace of a father holding his frightened child in the dark. Malior's legacy built empires. Liriel's legacy built communities. Malior's legacy created kings. Liriel's legacy created silent heroes. And so human history unfolded, not as a straight line, but as an eternal dance between these two legacies, a tug-of-war between building walls and building bridges, between accumulating power and sharing love. And that struggle, that silent war, has led us all the way to today, to this very moment. And now, after this long journey through millennia, we have reached the final point. But this final point is your beginning. Because the story of the architects of dawn, of Malior and Liriel, is not an ancient myth for you to hear and forget. It is a mirror. The great war between cold order and warm love is no longer happening in the celestial realms. It is happening right here, right now, inside your own soul. Every day you stand at a crossroads. When you choose the shortcut, choose selfishness, choose to judge others instead of trying to understand. When you see kindness as weakness and power as the ultimate goal, that is when you are listening to the echo of Malior. But when you choose to take a second to listen to someone in pain, when you choose forgiveness over hatred, when you create something beautiful just for the joy of creation, when you feel a surge of happiness from helping someone with no expectation of reward, that is when the spark of empathy inside you is burning bright. That is when you are carrying on the legacy of Liriel. You see, this story was not told for you to search for gods in the sky. It was told for you to recognize and awaken the God sleeping in your own heart. You are not a flawed creation. You are not the result of a punishment. You are an inheritor. You carry within you both the logical potential of the stars and the unconditional love of a great sacrifice. You are the balance. You are the answer. That legacy is yours. Protect it, nurture it, and most importantly, spread it. If during this journey you have felt even a little of the warmth of that spark, if there was a moment when your heart resonated with a truth you felt you had long known, then this is your moment to speak. Comment below with the affirmation, "I am the legacy." This is not just a comment, it is a declaration, a promise to yourself and to the legacy that flows in your veins. Let us create a community of fire bearers, of people who choose love in a world that often worships power. Share this light. And to continue with us on this journey of discovering forgotten legacies and awakening the great truths that lie deep within each of us, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Because the greatest truth sometimes is the one we find when we dare to look within. Thank you for listening.